A couple of weeks ago, we talked a little bit about a program at the Calhoun County Treasurer's Office that helps try and at least clean up some foreclosed properties. As you can imagine, once they fall into those roles, then it's a matter of trying to figure out how to keep them looking somewhat presentable while they traverse the process to someone new, a new owner. And the treasurer in Calhoun County, Brian Wensauer, is here to talk about that, along with Melinda Weaver from the Treasurer's Office as well, here in Calhoun County. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, this is a legitimate issue, isn't it?
Definitely.
Once a property is not being maintained, you've got to deal with that on top of the fact that you're trying to move these homes back onto the tax rolls.
That's correct.
So what do you do about it, Brian?
Well, one of the things I've tried to do, first off, is spend some time out in the neighborhoods and the planning groups. I've tried to go out to different groups, reach out. One of the important things that I'm finding is that listening to the people that live next door to some of these homes that have been foreclosed on. I want to make sure that I'm out there with Melinda. Melinda and I actually travel together to each of the properties that are foreclosed on. And we just want to make sure that the people that are living next to these have a lot of concerns.
I'll bet they do.
Having not lived next door to these myself, it was a rude awakening to see the amount of trash that is left in the yards. It really bothered me a lot. Melinda, of course, has worked several years in the treasurer's office and has experienced this in the past. But for me, it was really a rude awakening. And first thing I told her, and she remembers this, is I said, we can't have this trash in the yards as long as I'm a treasurer, and our department is responsible for this properties now. So I'm trying to make sure that we do a fair cleanup and go around and pick up the trash. One of them, we used a very large dumpster just to pick up one house around the outside of it.
Yeah.
I know for a fact from hearing back from the people in the community that picking up this trash around it makes their house look a lot better and doesn't draw down, pull down the values of the property. Because one of the things that Melinda works with is trying to work on getting these properties set for auction.
Sure.
Maybe Melinda wants to just quickly say that why we want to clean up around it and make sure that we want to get these back on the tax rolls. And the only way to do that, I know I wouldn't want to buy something with a bunch of trash around it.
Right.
So what do you think on that, Melinda?
I agree. And like you said, our main concern is to try to get them back on the tax roll. And if we can do that by cleaning up these properties and making them more presentable to individuals for our auction, it's definitely needed and very important.
How does this happen? Is it just by virtue of no one living in these homes that papers fly along in the wind and next thing you know it adds up? Or is it a situation in which someone who might be looking to dump something knows that house is empty and so I'm going to just throw some trash there? How does this generally happen?
I think it's both of those reasons. People find a vacant home that nobody's living in, and they think that's a wonderful place to dump trash. We see that all the time.
Oh, my.
But on the other side of it, there's people that unfortunately live with lots of trash around their properties, and they don't take value in their property.
So it might have been that way before it became a foreclosed home.
Correct.
A lot of people live with this type of trash. Rather than taking it to the road, we've walked in and seen actual waste management containers with trash just dumped on the back porches.
Just haven't gone out
piled.
to the street.
And when I say piled, we're talking at least 3 to 4 feet of trash in trash bags that could have been just taken to the curb.
Right.
It's sad, especially for the neighbors. We are leaping, the values of homes, the prices of homes have gone up. I was at the town hall meeting last night. I listened to Lynn Gray Ward talk about what's happening in our community around Battle Creek especially. And the inventory of new homes is down.
Yes.
Sales are up. So we want to be one, and that was one of the things that we did talk about is our land bank homes that we have for sale. we do have some inventory. So one nice thing is things are starting to look up, and I want to be part of that with our team. Our team is really working hard and trying to make sure that what we have as our properties that are back on the tax rolls and making the community look better. That's the important thing that we're trying to do.
When we come back in a minute, we'll talk about what step happened next. So, Brian, you had that rude awakening. How did this get coordinated? And we'll discuss that coming up in just a moment on 95.3 WBCK. We're here with the Calhoun County Treasurer, Brian Wensauer, and Melinda Weaver of the Treasurer's Office. So this is the thing. You've got homes that suddenly are in a foreclosure situation. The Treasurer's Office is overseeing some of that. Now you have homes you have to try and maintain or at least clean up to some extent. So, Brian, you had that awakening you talked about, what it's like to live next door to a home that is not being maintained because it is in a foreclosure situation. So how did you change this?
Well, one of the things, as I mentioned, we brought in dumpsters, and we have a cleanup team that we have hired that we've worked with for quite a few years, if I'm not mistaken, Melinda. They go out and they make sure that the lot is picked up, because we also have to mow. A lot of people don't realize the grass is growing. Sunshine and a lot of rain we've had. Keeping up with the grass is a challenge in itself.
So the process was already there, but I think you're saying
a lot of people don't realize that the cost of this. Stop and think, if you hired somebody just to do your lawn, well, how many lawns do we have? And all of this funding actually comes from our delinquent tax revolving fund. And this is monies that we collect when the properties come over from the municipalities. We add penalties and interest, and that money is what we use to look at blighted homes. Possibly we may have to demo the home or do something like that. And that kind of brings up a little thing about down here on Riverside that's been coming up. This historical home, is probably some of the people have read about in the paper, and got a chance to look at some of the historical information about the Shepherd's home. Being the first school teacher in Battle Creek, bringing textbooks actually to Battle Creek back in the 1830s.
Saw that,
And I, for one, went in with Melinda and with the Krista from the land bank to view the inside of the home. And being a historical type person who I love the types of buildings that we have here, I don't want to see this building be tore down. That's going to be one of my goals, to make sure that the preservation. We've seen too many of these beautiful homes being tore down. So one of the things that I'd like Melinda to talk about is the process that we kind of go through when a property comes to the Treasurer's Office first, especially something as significant as the home on Riverside.
There's probably an assessment that has to take place. You have to figure out what you're dealing with.
Well, there's a couple things we do. First, when it comes over to delinquent, as Brian said, there's multiple statements that get mailed out to the homeowner to let them know they have delinquent taxes. Then it will forfeit after it's been with our office for a year. After the forfeiture, then we will go out and do personal property inspection or visits and notify the owner to let them know the help that's out there that they possibly could get so that the property doesn't foreclose. When we went to 373 Riverside, of course, it was vacant. So we just posted the home. And then we foreclosed on it. And as Brian said, we go out and do foreclosure visits. And him and I went out and visited it, and it was all boarded up. So we had to make another trip out with Krista, the director of the land bank, and we toured the building. And there's a lot of repairs that need to be done there. It's not going to be a cheap project for anybody to do. Our goal is not to tear down buildings. However, sometimes we don't get what we want because the cost is
prohibitive.
So we do some due diligence there in looking at this building. We get with the inspector of Battle Creek City. They go through, inspect it. They give us a price of what the estimated cost would be to fix it, and also the value of the property. And then we sit down as a team once everything is done, and we determine what properties need to possibly be on a demo. Unfortunately, Krista got a huge grant this last year to help with demos. But as Brian said, that's not our goal for this property. However, sometimes it happens. So we're working on this property. It's going to be something that we really investigate and see all our options out there.
Yeah. I'm actually reaching out to some of the different historical areas. I'm open to listen to anybody that's got an idea. One of them that came up was the Fort Custer Museum that's on the base out there where you can't get on unless you've got access.
Right.
Maybe they may want to bring their museum down there. Maybe we want to take a look at the history of the Potawatomis during the 1830s. Were there a presence around the Shepherd's Farm about that time? Maybe we could talk about possibly bringing a Indian school type, first school in Battle Creek teacher, bringing a museum of history of the Indians and how they were in the community. I know they were near that farm at that time. So we're uncovering every type of aspect that we could look at that maybe we could bring in. Maybe a young professional may want to take that home and make it a single home and keep the architecture there. So we're looking at any ideas, and I'm open to anybody that would love to come back and say, hey, what can we do with this property?
Have you ever had professionals, contractors step up and say, I'll volunteer to do some of the work?
Actually, that happened at the Brass Band of Battle Creek on Saturday. I was approached by a couple of retired carpenters who said, why don't we get some of our retired carpenters to donate their time and come back and bring this back to its original style with some of the carpentry that a lot of the young guys don't know how to do now. And maybe do some training. One of the other things that popped up at that conversation was the Career Center. How about teaching restoration rather than just putting up wallboard and putting it on? Going back to the old style of restoration. Maybe we could get some of these young kids involved in saying, wow, that would be a great profession to restore some of these old buildings and get involved that way. So another idea.
Maybe we should call this old house.
Yes, there we go.
The problem we deal with, too, is not just, getting volunteers to go into these homes to maybe do this work, is the regulations, the asbestos containing, the lead containing. So it's not that we can just have anybody go into a home. They have to be properly licensed and know what they're dealing with. So that's where Brian was talking about the Career Center. It would be really wonderful to see them get a program that teaches these young kids about all this asbestos, lead abatement, all of the things that they're going to run into as they're really doing construction work.
That work is still being done. Right. Somebody has to know how to do it. All right. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Do you have a timeline for some kind of movement forward on that property?
Well, actually, we still have to go through the process of our auctions. That's mandatory by our statutes that we have to follow. But there's some creative things. That's the nice part about some of this. We can be creative, and definitely we're going to be creative on this and not allow this to end up as it did. Actually, this property transferred from the Historical Society to a developer who did nothing with it and ended up just dumping it back onto the county.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen.
Right.
Again.
Once you see something happen, you hate to be back at square one again.
We don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So that's the nice part about what we can do, and that's the part about working with the land bank. We're very fortunate to have our land bank, and that process removes a lot of the, what do I want to call it, as far as restrictions.
They have a lot more.
Deed. Maybe there's somebody hiding out on a deed or something.
Oh, yeah.
It removes all of this and allows the property through quiet title to pass to a new owner.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of creative things that we kind of take a look at.
Well, that'll be exciting to see how this sorts out. In the meanwhile, this situation to which you refer, the cleanup that is involved in some properties that are foreclosed, if somebody's listening now and they have a home next to them or near them that's in that kind of a situation. Is it fair to say that you're on your way to that? It's
Yes.
probably in a process.
Yes, or they can reach out to us and find out.
We actually been, when we go out to a property, if we see a neighbor,
Talk
we'll
to them.
actually walk over and talk to the neighbor.
Yeah.
Because that's who we want to listen to. They also help us tell us, is the property possibly somebody living there?
Right. Something going on.
Sometimes we find that there's people living there that aren't actually the owners.
Uh-huh.
And or renters.
Squatters have shown up. Yeah.
Yes.
All
Not
right.
too often, but it does happen.
So with those concerns, you can contact the Treasurer's Office in Calhoun County if you have a situation like that in your neighborhood that you want to talk about. And obviously, as you just heard the Treasurer say, they'd like to talk to you about those things. Well, congratulations on this success, and we'll check in again soon on these and other issues,
Appreciate
too.
it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that's the Calhoun County Treasurer, Brian Wensauer, and Melinda Weaver from the Treasurer's Office today on 95.3 WBCK.